Mr. Chairman, you are live now if you want to proceed.
Okay, I'd like to welcome the public to our hearing on the work of the Charter Review Commission. Tonight we plan to give a presentation to the public regarding the discussions we've had and the recommendations that we plan to make to the City Council. This is the public's opportunity to weigh in and hear what we've been talking about, give their opinions. I would like to say that to the extent we've been able to, we've invited the public, at least up until the COVID crisis, we'd invited the public to attend our meetings as well and have an opportunity for interjection there. And I want the public to be sure and feel confident that not only will they have the opportunity to say what's on their mind tonight, they will also be faithfully represented in our subsequent presentation to the City Council to the extent that that's appropriate. So if you'd like to proceed with the presentation, Brenda, I'm ready.
Okay, Catherine Walker, our city attorney, is going to present your discussions to date.
Okay, can you all see that?
Yes.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Brenda, could we pause for a second? And I'm not seeing us show up live on the city's YouTube. I'm not sure if we're live yet.
Oh, okay. It says we are.
Live a minute ago, but now it doesn't.
I'm not finding it on the page.
Yeah.
Is Bryce with you? Can he check on that before we go?
Yeah, I think he's checking.
Okay.
Might be your connection, Annalise. It looks like other people have it pulled up.
Other people are having it pulled up? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then if it's just me, let's carry on.
Okay.
Okay. I will go through these slides quickly so that we can get to public comment. Bob, if you have anything to add at any time, please just jump in. I'm a little under the weather. It turns out I'm allergic to the Wichita Mountains where I was this weekend. So if I mute myself, it's because I'm coughing and I don't want to do that to you all and make you listen to that. So I will try and get through this without too much coughing. So the Charter Review Commission was appointed in the summer of 2019 to review specific items requested by City Council. Up until COVID, we met monthly. All those meetings were open to the public, and under the resolution appointing the committee or the commission, we were to have quarterly public hearings and quarterly reports to City Council. I believe our last one was in January through April, May, June, and July. I don't think we were able to meet. And then we resumed in August. So we're back with the remainder of the items that were assigned to the Charter Review Commission to report on. I will go through the items that we had talked about at the last hearing just because it was pre-COVID. It feels, for me at least, like it was about 5 years ago. You all may feel the same, so I'll go through all of them, and the new ones will be later on in the presentation. So the first thing you all were asked to look at was the stipend that the mayor and the council members receive for their service. Currently, they receive $50 per month plus $10 for each regular or special meeting attended, but no more than $100 a month. The CRC went through this in great detail and looked at, how do you determine what an appropriate annual stipend would be, and recommended a range for the mayor, $8,100 to $11,700 per year for her service. And it's important to note this language has it beginning with the next term. So we would not be asking this current council to vote on raises for themselves. It would be raises for future terms. And then each council member, it would increase from $100 a month to $5,400 to $7,800 per year, beginning in 2022. This also calls for a compensation commission that would determine and set the appropriate monthly stipend going forward at least every 3 years. And they would look at that compensation, the city's budget, things like that, and decide whether or not a stipend increase was justified. It would not become effective though until the next term for each council member. So again, not wanting to put the council members in the position of voting on a raise for themselves, even though it would have to go to the voters initially. We also looked at whether or not council should be reimbursed for cell phone expenses. There's no current language in the charter that allows for reimbursement of cell phone expenses, and the Charter Commission looked at this and recommended no changes, mostly because, not because I think the commission felt like it would be an inappropriate addition to the stipend, but because it probably isn't something that needs to be in the charter. It's more of a policy change that could be handled administratively. The mayor and council members' term, both the length of the term and when it expires, were reviewed by the commission. So currently, council members serve 2-year terms. Odd wards are elected in odd numbered years, even wards elected in even numbered years. And the mayor rotates on a 3-year term. So 1 year, the mayor will be with the odd numbered wards, and the next time he or she is up for election, it would be with the even numbered wards. They take office the first Tuesday in July after the election, which is generally much earlier in the year, February generally for the general election, and then April typically for the runoff. So there's a bit of time lag between election and taking office. So the Charter Commission looked at this, and beginning in 2023, again, trying not to impact current terms, they recommend that we move to 3-year terms for council members. Beginning in 2024, the terms would begin on the first Tuesday following certification of the election results. And that's because of the mayor's term being longer than the council member's term and trying to get everyone on the same schedule. So this is that language. I won't read the whole thing to you, but I will pause for a minute and let those folks who may be watching look at that. You can see in the first paragraph, it's talking about the 3-year term. And then the second paragraph is talking about, the second sentence is where it talks about when the term would begin, move up from July to the Tuesday following certification of the election results. So there's not that lag anymore. And then same with the mayor. And the years are just to try and work out the timing so we're not impacting current council member terms, and we're kind of getting everyone on the same schedule in a way that makes sense. The next thing the commission was asked to look at was whether or not to require a candidate for office to reside in the ward they're running for a minimum of 6 months in order to be a candidate for council. Currently, they have to reside in Portland for 6 months, but they don't have to have lived in the ward they're running to represent for that long. There is no time requirement for that. So the recommendation of the commission was that you must reside in the ward for which you seek election for 6 months prior to the election date. And if your ward designation changes within that 6 months because of reapportionment, that's what happens typically when the census comes out. We redraw ward boundaries based on that data. If your ward designation changes because of that, the 6-month requirement would be waived, but you must live within the ward boundaries at the time of filing. And this is what that language looks like. And again, I won't read it all, but I will pause for a second to let you see that. Okay, sorry about that. The next item is resignation upon filing for another elected office. The charter does not currently require a candidate for another office to resign from service on the council. And the Charter Review Commission looked at this and recommended no change to the charter. Partisan elections. This was something that was proposed for the commission to look at. Currently, there is no partisan election in Norman. You actually aren't allowed to put your party on anything that you put out, any mailers, things like that. And the commission looked at this closely and recommended no changes to the current charter language. Filling vacant council positions. This has come up a lot in the last couple of years. We've had quite a number of vacancies. I think we've gone through this 4 or 5 times in the last couple of years. Our current charter requires that vacancies in office be filled by a majority vote of the remaining members of council, but if council doesn't get that done within 60 days of the vacancy, they have to call a special election to fill the vacancy for the unexpired term. The Charter Commission looked at this and really looked at the process we've been using the last couple of years, which is to appoint a committee made up of the vacant ward seats residents, so people recently who lived in Ward 2 or Ward 4, Ward 6, and I think there was one more, it seems like, but we've gone through this several times. Like I said, council appointed 5 residents from that ward to that committee. The committee sent 1 name forward to council, and that is really the process that was recommended by the CRC as well. But still, if the vacancy is not filled within 60 days, council is required to call a special election to fill that vacancy. And this is what that language looks like. They underlined, anytime you see anything underlined, that's new language. If it's stricken, that's language that the commission's proposed to delete. Okay, Article 7, Section 2, appointment and removal of the city attorney by city council. Currently, the city attorney is appointed by the city manager, subject to the approval of a majority of council, and the city attorney may only be removed by the city manager. The CRC looked at this. This has come up a couple of times over the years, and the language that's being proposed, it's going to look lengthy, but it really just models this appointment after the other employee of the council, the city manager. So it models, this language models the city manager's language in terms of being appointed almost word for word. That means the position would become an at-will position. The city attorney would be appointed by a majority of council and could be removed with 5 votes of council. Like I said, it's a little lengthy. All of this would be new language, but it mirrors the exact process that we have for the city manager. I'll leave that up for just a second. Okay. Same thing with the city auditor. The commission was asked to look at creating a position of city auditor that would be subject to appointment and removal by city council. That position doesn't exist in the charter at this time. And the committee looked at this and didn't recommend any changes to the current charter as far as adding that employee. I think the discussion really centered around the ability of the city to go get an independent audit when needed. That was what the commission recommended we continue to do. Addition of consequences to the charter for violation of the city's ethics ordinance. Probably 8 or 9 years ago, we adopted an ethics ordinance that applies to council in section 2-103 of the city code. It does not exist in the charter. And the commission was asked to look at whether or not we should consider adding consequences to that ordinance to the charter. Currently, under the ethics ordinance, there isn't really a consequence for an ethics violation, but it sets up a really good framework to disclose conflicts and avoid the appearance of conflicts of interest. And the Charter Review Commission looked at that and did not recommend any changes or additions to the charter. Requiring council, and this is, I think, probably the new one since our last public hearing. This is where the new items start. Requiring council to consider calling a utility rate election under certain conditions. This has been looked at by every Charter Review Commission, I would venture to say, at least in the last 15 to 20 years. Our charter, because of some circumstances back in the 70s, includes a provision that requires any increase in utility rates, trash, sewer, water, those kind of things that are within our control, be submitted to the voters for approval or rejection. What I think everyone probably knows is that means we wait. We don't send forward rate increases often. And so the rate increases tend to be a little bit bigger because we're always kind of playing catch up. We want those elections to be successful. And so a lot of planning has to go into that, and you have to time it just right to make sure that it would be successful. So what the CRC recommended was that staff would be providing a rate study of each utility annually. We essentially do this with our budgeting anyway to determine what we can get done within the budget we have. What we would be adding really is what do we need to get done, and what kind of budgetary increase and rate increase would we need to get that done. And then council shall submit the rate increase for one or more utilities based on that rate study at the next council election. But however, of course, if something unexpected happens, council could call a special election to meet that need. And this is what that language looks like. That first sentence that is marked out is what is in the charter now. And then this adds the language requiring an annual rate study, and then what council has to do once they receive that rate study. We did leave in that last sentence, which is in the existing language now, that this section is self-executing and shall supersede all provisions in conflict therewith. The city can adopt legislation to facilitate the operations of the utilities, but we can't limit or restrict the provisions related to rate increases. The commission was also asked to look at establishing a community bill of rights. There's no language currently in the charter establishing a community bill of rights. In researching this, it appears that a community bill of rights is typically some document that asserts some rights related to local self-government and community interest. Sometimes they're focused on more environmental issues. Other times they're focused on trying to retain local control, but it's been probably due to, it's had limited success, I would say, in the instances that we've looked at. And so the Charter Review Commission looked at some of these examples and recommended no additions to the charter. The Norman Regional Hospital Authority, board membership and examination of relationship. There were two different items related to the hospital authority. One was essentially a cleanup item requested by the hospital. I'm asking that the Norman Regional Hospital Authority, I can hear myself.
Okay, go ahead. I got it muted now. Sorry, Catherine.
That's okay. Currently, the hospital authority per the charter has 9 board members appointed by the mayor and council. The hospital authority is, of course, a public trust. The city is the sole beneficiary of the trust. There's a long history there where the city actually operated the hospital after World War II and then happily turned it over to a public trust. The city approves debt issuances for public trusts for which it's the beneficiary, but it's not legally or financially responsible for the actions of the authority. So under the current charter language, as I said, 9 board members appointed by the mayor with approval of the city council for 3-year terms. That board exercises general control of the health system, establishes hospital policies, accounts for funds, and appoints a hospital administrator, and they file their annual budget with the city clerk. The recommendation of the commission was to increase this from 9 to 11 board members as requested by the hospital. And this was really due to some of the growth regionally to address some of the failure of rural hospitals and the needs in those communities. But the language that's being proposed maintains at least 9 as Norman residents, but allows for 2 others to be appointed from communities that the Norman Regional Hospital System serves. No other changes were recommended, and this is that language. A little clean up there on the next to the last sentence. But other than that, it's just codifying the additional 2 members. The next item was require a vote of the electorate for TIFs over $5 million. TIFs have been a hot topic in Norman to varying degrees of success and varying types of TIFs. Their creation of Oklahoma statutes under the Local Development Act. Basically, it provides a means to capture sales tax and or ad valorem tax revenue from future development to pay for infrastructure and other authorized project costs. Currently, the charter doesn't address TIFs at all. The Charter Review Commission had a really great debate. And it ended up with a tie vote, looking at language that would require a vote of the electorate for any TIF supported by sales tax revenue and created by the city. This is another item that was requested by council, that the Charter Review Commission look at potential loopholes used to skirt the Open Meeting Act. The Open Meeting Act is a state law that tells us how to operate our meetings so that we can have an informed citizenry. It's an important act that guides all of our meetings and postings and minutes and all of that. Our current charter language requires that all meetings, regular, special, or adjourned, of the council, boards, commissions, authorities, and committees of the city be open to the public under such regulations as may be fixed by ordinance. And then it allows an executive session in compliance with state law. We additionally have adopted a resolution in 2011 that required all of our committees, subcommittees, and ad hoc committees who may not otherwise be subject to the Open Meetings Act. We required them with that resolution to follow it anyway. And then that was later codified in section 4-107. All boards, commissions, council subcommittees, and ad hoc committees must follow the Open Meetings Act. The CRC was not clear on what potential loopholes I think that the council member who requested this was talking about. So they requested additional clarification from the requesting council member. Similar story on the executive sessions. We were asked to review executive session restrictions and appropriate limits of use. Executive sessions are a part of the Open Meeting Act, and it's really the only meeting a public body can have behind closed doors. And even though you're behind closed doors, no votes can happen behind closed doors. They all have to come out of the closed meeting and have any vote in public. It's only allowed in certain situations. For us, it's typically employment issues regarding public officers or employees, negotiations concerning bargaining groups, purchase or appraisal of real property, confidential communications between a public body and its attorney in certain situations, and then any matter where disclosure would violate state or federal law. And again, the commission looked at this. We talked about the Open Meetings Act and what's required, and additional clarification was requested. The commission was also asked to look at the ward boundary creation process. This is called reapportionment in the charter. This was amended with the last Charter Review Commission, and we'll actually get the chance to see those amendments in action as the census comes out later this year and early next year. But we have an ad hoc committee that will be appointed with 9 members that meet and make recommendations on ward boundaries in certain situations. So if the city's proposing to annex, add, or take away, de-annex property during the last quarter of the calendar year prior to the release of the census and continuing through the release of the final census, or upon unanimous recommendation of City Council. A lot of case law goes into determining how you can create these ward boundaries. There's a lot of litigation about these types of things. So you have to be really careful about how you do it, but ward boundaries can be adjusted or retained to equalize as nearly as practical the population of each ward. They have to be of compact, contiguous territory with boundaries drawn to reflect and respond to communities of common interest, ethnic background, and physical boundaries to the extent reasonably possible. Once the reapportionment committee comes up with their recommendation, they have to hold a public hearing, and then they send it to council, and council has to hold a public hearing before those ward boundaries can be changed. Like I said, this process was amended by the last Charter Review Commission, and we'll be utilizing it for the first time with this upcoming census. So consideration on this item was postponed and additional clarification was requested. With that, that's everything the commission's looked at so far. And I turn it over to Chairman Thompson to take public comment.
Thank you, Catherine. We appreciate your presentation, and of course, we've appreciated the help you have given us as a commission. Do we have any people joining us from the public?
We do. We have several people here. I think those of you that are here have attended before, so You'll go into the study session room and sit down in front of the computer to make your comments. I have received one email as well that I will read before we finish up.
Good evening. I'm Robert Castleberry, 47 Circle, Ward 3. If it would be okay, can we go back through the slides? We were sitting there very hard to see up on the screen, and I'd kind of like to see kind of what the review commission's recommendations were. I've got a few of them written down, but if we could go back through that, I think it would help a little bit better. Is that possible? We don't have the slides here.
Can you see that, Robert?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. No comment on that.
Okay, go to the prior one.
Again, I agree. No comment. No comment. So on this one, does it sound so? I'm reading this, the recommendation there will be no recommendation coming forward for or against.
Well, that's I'll field that question. That meeting had a little bit of a special circumstance to it. We didn't have very good or very complete participation on the part of our commission. I think that was one of the few times where we certainly had a quorum, but there were only 10 members attending, and a little awkward to have an even number when we're taking a vote on something. So we had the opportunity to we could have taken it to another meeting and had another vote. We could have taken it. We could have taken another vote in that meeting, but we'd had a great conversation, and we decided that in view of the fact that the council is going to have they're going to have access to our debate, they're going to have access to call us and talk to us about our opinions if they so desire. Our intention was to encourage the council to look at the pros and cons of this as we discussed it and proceed from that. I've tried as much as possible to keep our deliberations from becoming too polarized. And so I felt like trying to make this into a win and lose situation would be a mistake, especially since what we're doing is recommending to the council. We're not requiring anything of the council. And so in view of the fact that we had a very, in my opinion, very thorough debate and had actually made some productive changes to the body of work that they'd put in front of us, I thought that we'd have given them a sufficient debate to include in our report and let them decide as they will.
Thank you. I actually watched that meeting, and I agree with you. It was a very robust discussion. I had very good points, and I can see the dilemma there. So I appreciate the commission looking at that and just forwarding on the council. And I guess my one comment would be that I don't know why we would want to take a tool out of our tool bag. I think if you're electing your council to spend $250 million a year, a $5 million TIF should probably be under their realm. But I also see both sides of it. So don't have a whole lot of public comment on that at this time.
I'd like to clarify, Robert, that what the piece that we ended up voting on, the significance of this is that we as a committee had made some changes to what we actually voted on was a piece that would require the vote of the electorate for any TIF. And that was, I just want to be clear about that because we came to the conclusion that really, if you're going to vote on them, vote on them. And if you're not, don't. That we thought that the $5 million mark was something that could be, you know, it could be manipulated. It was pointed out that it was rather arbitrarily chosen. There's no real rationale between it and any other number. And so I just want to make sure that you and the public are clear on the fact that what we are hoping the council ends up debating about is a TIF on, I mean, a vote on any TIF.
Thank you for that clarification. Next item, please. No major comments here. Whether you have 9 or 11 board members, I don't think brings anything to the table, but I think again, on all of these, I really don't have a problem with these going to the vote of the people. And if there's no strong feelings one way or another, I would err on the side of putting it on the ballot and letting the people decide. But no major comments on that one way or another. Agree. This is actually one I did want to comment about, because this is one of the ones I put forward for you guys to look at. And I appreciate, I think this is actually an issue that Dr. Ellis and I actually agree on in principle, as far as looking at this going forward on an annual basis, whether you have a commission put together by council or elected officials. It's kind of what we wanted you to look at. So I appreciate you guys taking a look at that. Concept of having to annually, I know council already does that, but to go ahead and make it more of a formal process that, hey, every year when we have our elections, now it's going to increase the cost of our elections because now we're going to have a citywide election every year as opposed to just 4 wards. I think that additional cost may be worth it. Look at the utilities, and I think if you bring a strong enough case forward, we'll support utilities. They always have in the past. And I think by looking at this, I think it'd be a good thing to actually look at this more often. And I do support bringing this to an annual vote based upon the recommendation of whether it's a council commission put together or elected. I'll kind of leave it up in the air. I'm good with that either way, but I want this to be looked at more often than every 6 or 8 years or whenever council thinks, hey, this would be a good time to bring forward an election because we don't have anything else on the ballot. So I think it would help the voters have more, the citizens have more input into how their city runs and creates more transparency, and takes a little pressure off the council to figure out when to stage elections. So I appreciate you guys' work on this. This was also one that I brought forward. If there's not going to be any consequences to violation of the city ethics ordinance, do away with it. I strongly believe there has to be some consequences, or there's no point in having a code of ethics. And I think we all think, or I hope we all believe, we need a code of ethics, but with no punishment or no ramifications for violating that code of ethics, it's pointless. There's no point having rules if there's no thing to go out there. Now, I don't think it needs to be easily for a council member to be removed from office. I think that needs to be for something that's egregious or criminal. But I also don't think it should just be, I look more towards monetary fines. Maybe if there's a fine on there that it goes to the Parks Foundation or something to the city. But I think I wish you guys would look at this a little closer, maybe revisit this. And again, what's the point in having an ordinance or any ordinance, whether it's an ethics ordinance, a parking ordinance, a noise ordinance, a mask ordinance, with no penalties for violating that ordinance? So this disappoints me that, and this is a tough one. This is a tough one. I understand that. What the punishment should be, that is our part, but I wish you guys would revisit this and come up with some type of recommendation. Basically send a message that ethics is important in city government, and we're going to hold people accountable. Thank you.
Can I offer you a
Please do.
brief explanation?
Yes, sir.
Because I actually am in agreement with you, and I think that most of the committee, maybe all of the committee, would have agreed with your remarks. We found the request to be open-ended enough that it was difficult for us to contain an actual conversation or an actual debate. I think that this, and there are a few other items that we have recommended no action on, because we would like the council to take a closer look at what they are interested in recommending. We could have recommended that, yes, there be consequences. That would have been probably a little facetious on our part to just recommend, yes, we agree with that. We felt like the request needed to be more specific as to did they want a long list of items? Did they want us to produce a list of items? Did they want to produce a list of items that we could talk about and recommend consequences for them? So we just didn't feel like the request itself was definitive enough for us to have a good discussion. So we decided to recommend no changes, but we'd certainly welcome for the council to fill in some of those blanks so that we can actually hammer something out.
Well, I guess I'll apologize for that. I intentionally left it open up for you guys to come up with what those consequences would be, as opposed to tying your hands and saying violation of the city ethics code results in a $1,000 fine. Or, when council talked about this, it was to leave it. I think to establish consequences obviously means there are consequences, and wanted you guys to talk about, what those consequences would be. So I apologize if that wasn't clear enough, but I think you all agree there should be some, and hopefully we can revisit that.
Yeah, I think we're happy to take another shot at it with just a little bit more of a fine-tuned question.
Okay, thank you. Next item, please. Again, this is one that I brought forward, and I think most of you know that I truly believe that there needs to be an internal auditor, and best practices in the accounting profession and auditing profession is that an internal auditor or a city auditor reports to the highest level of command, or the board of directors. And Sarbanes-Oxley talks about this as far as going to the board of directors. My feedback is I highly recommend that we not only have a city auditor, but that he or she report to the city council directly to get rid of any independence issues and conflicts issues. So my input would be I obviously strongly recommend this, support this, because I recommended it. And I think a $250 million budget, we're a $1 billion company. Basically, if you look at all our assets, has a city auditor is just a standard position. And so since we're going to have that position, I believe we need to figure out who it reports to. So my input would be, obviously you could revisit this or maybe when it gets to council, since they've talked about having that position. And in order for it to report, I think the issue on this is in order to have it report to the council, it has to be in the charter. So if it's not in the charter, then the city auditor would report to the city manager. I think that would not be a best practices of how internal auditors perform their functions. You don't really want to report to your boss when you find something going on. You want to report to an independent body. So next item, please. This is a tough one. I see both sides of this argument. I do not support having the city attorney report to the city council for political reasons, as we've seen in the past. I think a professional city manager seeks the advice of his legal counsel. Council members are much shorter lived than the manager is, and you have continuity here, and you need to be able to have some type of job security as opposed to the political whims of the council members. The last time 5 council members got upset with city attorney, it cost the citizens $500,000. But if you are going to have the city attorney report to the city council, then why not have all department heads report to the city council? Why is the city attorney special as opposed to any other department head, whether it be public works, the finance, recreation? We have the city attorney is a department head of legal division. And why, I guess that'd be my question. Why was the city attorney as a department head any more special than anybody else? They should all report. So I know it's a tough one though. I see both sides of that, so I appreciate that one. Again, I think when you guys probably went through this, it was before the Ward 2 fiasco. If the way this is written, after appointment and recommendation of one candidate from the selection committee made up of 5 residents of the ward, it will occur. It seemed like even the council members weren't clear of, does it have to be unanimous recommendation? Does it have to be a majority? Does it have to be a consensus? And because of that ambiguity, they had trouble deciding on what to do. So I think if you're going to have a committee of ward members, have 5 of them, then whatever they come up with, what council goes with. If council doesn't want to do that, then to me, the simplest solution is just appoint somebody, or you have a special election. Just have a special election, and that takes all the politics out of it. The ward be represented, and it just takes all the trust, the transparency, all the issues that we have. We've seen the fiascos the past couple of times of doing it. I think we were just doubt, let people vote on it. So those would be my comments on that. I think we've got an issue petition that's going to kind of address this. So no point talking about this one. I agree with no change on that one also. I think, yeah, this is well worded. I think you guys did a good job of getting the intent of having somebody that lives in the ward. And so I would agree with this one. As far as increasing the terms, I know this is a tough one. If we are going to increase the terms of council members from 3 years or 2 years, 3 years, and the mayor from 3 years to 4 years, then we need to reduce the requirements for a recall. If you're going to give more time to council members and the mayor, then you need to give more transparency and more accountability to the electorate to, we made a mistake, we need to get this person out of office, or they have done something that's totally against what they said they were going to do, or what we've seen. I mean, with the past recall elections and the movement, whether the signatures hit the 25% requirement or not, almost every single ward, there was more people that signed than the person got votes for. And so I think if you're going to do this, you need to also have a companion item to reduce the requirements for a recall. I do think that the spirit of this makes sense. It's very hard. Figure out what you're doing in 2 years. The first year is pretty much a learning experience for pretty much every council member. You have 1 year, you actually get to do some legislation and get going, and then you're up for re-election. I know that's the way Congress does it. It's for Congress every 2 years. It should be good enough for council members. But I think you want a little more continuity at the city level. And this maybe if you have somebody serve for 3 years or 4 years, you might get people, a better selection of people to go through there. So don't have any strong feelings in this one way or another. But I do think if you are going to increase it, then you need to increase or decrease the recall criteria. But thank you. I would agree with that. If you are going to increase cell phone expenses, then I think those phones, since they're being paid for by the citizens, should be available to citizens at any point in time you want. As far as open records, that type of stuff. Most cell phones have unlimited plans of $34 a month. So it would be nice if for council members to be reimbursed for this, but I don't think there's any change, and it certainly is not a charter worthy type of thing. I think I agree with you. It's a policy that the city should do just like they would any other employee. And I know I'm confused as council members are not considered employees of the city. However, we get W-2s. So you give W-2s to employees, but we're not, council members are not employees. So I'm always been confused on what the actual classification is on them. So I think it should be, I agree with you as a policy change at the admin level, not at the charter level. This is, enjoyed your discussion on this one. This was a hard one. You know, what was the proper level of compensation for amount of hours and time you put in? Again, I like the ranges. And I think this is probably something that council should probably take a look at and put something like this to avoid the people, let them decide if they want to increase the amount of compensation. I think at $100 a month, for the most part, you only get people that can afford to do it. And I think that's problematic sometimes. So I appreciate you guys looking at this and bringing this more in line with some of the other cities. I don't think it should be high enough that it's a career. That's your only source of income. It is a part-time job. It should be a part-time job. And so I think the compensation is commensurate with that. So again, thank you very much. I know this is a very hard deal, and I know basically everybody that's on this committee is some of the best and brightest. I know that the council did a great job of putting together you guys with your past experience as council members and part of city government. And so I appreciate you guys looking at this, and those are my recommendations for this. Thank you.
If there's anybody else that wishes to comment, you can go ahead and go into the study session room and sit in front of the computer. In the meantime, I'm going to read a comment that I received via email, and then we have some comments on the YouTube stream as well. This comment is from Wendy Hill, Ward 3, and she will be making comments on specific items, not every item. She wants to preface it with appreciation for your service to our community, and she has the following comments. Review of Article 7, Section 2 to consider whether the city attorney should be appointed and subject to removal by the city council. Her comments are: the role of city attorney has been one that provides continuity in the midst of rotating elected officials and should be a position that is neutral with the goal of supporting the work of the city council while also protecting the rights of its citizens and the rule of law. Making such a position appointed and subject to removal by a city council could jeopardize the city attorney's ability to provide frank, effective advice because of the threat, in parentheses, realized or not, of losing one's job. It is my understanding that the current protocol to the city attorney is the city attorney is hired by the city manager, who manages the department heads. The hiring and firing of the city manager is within the purview of the city council's oversight. I do not think it is wise to be for city council to begin micromanaging city positions or putting itself in the position to sway legal counsel by way of control over the city attorney's position. The next section is the Article 2, Section 1, increasing the monthly stipend provided to the mayor and city council members. Her comments are, I personally am not opposed to a modest increase in compensation, emphasis on modest. It is a role of mostly volunteer. We as citizens are not asking the city council members to increase their workload by taking over more control. The next item is Article 2, Section 1, which is the charter adding reimbursement for cell phones. I'm opposed to changing this aspect of the charter. The compensation above should anticipate all work expenses. I'm quite confident the council members are able to cover their own cell phones, and we know that most cell phone bills are all inclusive with data. If they cannot handle the cell phone expense, I don't think they should be running for office. The next Article 2, Sections 2, 5, 6, and 14, to consider the term of office for council members. I disagree with extending terms of office. I especially disagree with extending the term of mayor. We are not electing a president, but a mayor for the city of Norman. We have witnessed how hard it is to remove a mayor from office when the citizens disagree with the performance. Extending that term would cause greater discord when citizens are ready for a change in direction. Next item is Article 2, Section 10, where the charter would require a candidate for city council to reside in the ward he or she seeks election for a minimum of 6 months prior to filing. She would not oppose this change. The next item is Article 16, Section 2, which is in reference to the utility rates. Her comments are, before recommending changes, I think there should be detailed discussion in the minutes of this meeting to explain to the citizens the thought process for recommending such a change and explanation of why it is necessary. The next item is relative to the Community Bill of Rights. Her comments are, no, thank you. I think the United States Constitution is sufficient. I do not think we need additional protections that could be dependent on whoever is in control at the time. Next section, adding language to the charter for votes on TIF. And her comments are, I don't know that I'm totally opposed to the idea of setting a limit for commitment, but I think $5 million is too low of a number. This could be extremely limiting to prospective new businesses and decimate hopes to increase sales tax revenue and jobs. We elect individuals for a reason, another reason to keep terms of service at current levels. The next item is how to fill a vacancy, council vacancy. Her comments are, I completely oppose this item of review. Such power should never be delegated to a council member. The citizens have elected a certain individual. They have not entrusted that individual with the power to delegate their role. And as you recall, the original resolution talked about the outgoing council member to name their replacement. And I think that's what she's speaking to. That wasn't necessarily how you all reviewed it, but maybe I shouldn't have said that, but based on her comments, I think that's why she's saying this. The same would be said for individual naming of an agent and power of attorney. The individual name would not be able to delegate their role to the person of their choosing. I have really never heard of such a suggested overreach of power. I would instead recommend changing the charter to dictate that if there is a vacancy, it's more than 9 months until the next election, a special election should be held. There should be more settled direction on how to fill the vacant seat of council member. Article 2, Section 11 is the partisan elections question. And her comments are, I support this item. I understand the desire to keep the city elected positions nonpartisan, but we are past a small town where there is simple decisions involved. Large budgets, policy making that affects our daily lives, etc., mean that we need to know where candidates stand on governing. Political party affiliations give a glimpse into one's governing philosophies. Thank you for your time and consideration. And now I believe Annalise has several comments to read from the YouTube feed.
Yes. Kim and Shelley Harris, Ward 5, for more than 25 years. Where would funding for raises for mayor and city council come from? What data is there supporting need for raises? Caroline Webb, Ward 1, ethics violations consequences should apply to the mayor, manager, and clerk as well. Kim and Shelley Harris, Ward 5 again, suggesting changing election dates for mayor and city council members to November since there is a much larger voter turnout historically. Kristen Thomas, Ward 6, I disagree. If we decrease recall requirements, we will have every person being recalled every election on both sides. Kendra Wesson, Ward 3, if a vacancy occurs, there should be an election. Sean Boyd, Ward 2, I'm in agreement with Mr. Castleberry that the city attorney should not report to the council unless all department heads report to the council. Kim and Shelley Harris, Ward 5 again. Request special election for any vacated city council seat. The committee method has proven ineffective and partisan. Jared Kuntz, Ward 4. I strongly disagree that council mayor should be treated as a part-time job. The implication is that one must be independently wealthy to hold those offices. Kristen Thomas, Ward 6. I believe that city council and mayor should absolutely get a raise. What they currently receive is laughable and not at all commensurate with the demand of the position. Anna Merritt, Ward 5. Council members are elected by the people. If one is recalled or resigns, the opening needs to go back to the vote of the people. Caroline Webb, Ward 1. I'm concerned about the boundary lines being rearranged in order to dilute the voices of the already marginalized Ward 1. I do not want to see longer term limits. Mike Trabano, Ward 5. If a vacancy occurs, there should be an election. If there is any raise for the city council or manager, it should be voted on by the people. That's all I have at this time.
I have no other email comments. Are there any further public comments from the audience? Anybody else wish to speak? I'm not seeing any, Chairman Thompson.
I'd like
Two
to,
more public comments on the social media channel.
Chairman Thompson.
yes, Tom.
I have a question for the committee. I don't know if this needs to come in the form of a motion, but I do believe we need to reconsider, rediscuss the issue about the TIF. I think there's enough public appetite and concern about the current state of affairs as it pertains to the TIF that a tie vote is completely unacceptable. We need to come back to the council with a firm resolution, one way or the other, either an up or down, but a tie just isn't reasonable.
Anybody else like to weigh in on that? I mean, I have to say that to Tom's point, when we hang on just a second, Brian, I'll let you weigh in. I was just going to say that to Tom's point, the way it was reported in the paper immediately after our coming to that conclusion left the public with the impression that we had that we actually had come to a conclusion and that we were recommending against the vote on the TIF when that wasn't our intent. That wasn't my intent to send it forward that way. So Tom may have a point that we need to, for the sake of the public's understanding and good communication, we may need to revisit this. Brian?
Thanks, Bob. And Tom, I appreciate your comments, but I also understand that, everybody serves on this committee, as being appointed, and it's our personal responsibility to get to the meetings. We had multiple discussions of this very topic over more than one meeting, correct?
Yep.
Okay. So, the point being is that it's a very divisive topic amongst our community, no matter which side of the equation you're on. And given the fact that what we put forth is merely a recommendation only, I'm not sure that that's a great use of time, but that's just my personal opinion.
Can I
Doug?
say something? Tom?
Doug? Commissioner Cubberly was asking to be recognized.
You're muted, Doug. Okay, I think you're. Okay.
This is Kevin.
Just a second, Kevin. Doug, we
Yeah.
can't hear you, even though it shows you're not muted. This happened before, Annalise. And you told them how to fix that? Can you give him some suggestions?
Their audio may not be connected, but they would not be able to hear us if their audio wasn't connected. Perhaps they're listening through a device that doesn't have a microphone.
Okay, he's saying never mind.
Kevin?
Yeah. That's been good. I just want to remind the kind of already have that this group, both versions of it when we met during the last council and had those recommendations, is that really my interpretation is we are given these questions and asked to kind of grind into them in a granular sense, and then give our best educated opinions of based on the collecting information and staff input and anything else any of us know, our best feeling for what might be best for the community. And that would include sending questions, which we have back to the council for further review. But at the end, the public needs to understand completely that they all go to council. It's up to the council for questions. And number two, it's up to the council as to whether they want to do that, not to our group. So we're advisory only, but we want to collect information. So this has been helpful to me in some sense. And sometimes that kind of, as Bob's pointed out, kind of catches us in the middle of understanding or not understanding what we are suggesting to the council. And sometimes we're not actually, after we grind something out, it's difficult to come up with something. So it's a little bit of a misnomer to say we've had a vote, because we're sending it on. They can change, they can ignore what we're doing. They can, in the council, they can change it or alter it, amend it, put it in whatever format they want, or set it to the side for a future discussion. So, we're trying to help them get to a point where they can answer their own questions.
Anybody else?
Does that fit, guys?
Trey?
Mr. Chairman,
Tom?
one last point. I appreciate Brian's observation, and I know it's well intended, and I appreciate his comments. Unfortunately, because this committee only meets once a month, and this particular conversation took place the second week of January, which obviously there was a conflict for a number of us to be able to participate in this particular conversation. And I was very boisterous about my concerns on the matter in our previous meeting in December. I just think that there's two options that we have before us at this particular moment in time. One option is for this committee to step back on our own and revisit this topic, or the city council can direct us. I would recommend that we go ahead and have that conversation on our own, rather than being directed by the city council. Just go ahead and get ahead of this process from that vantage point. We know that a tie is is really unacceptable, particularly on such on a matter that is such of pertinent interest to the community at large. And there's a very strong appetite for us to come to some sort of a resolution on it. A tie is simply just not acceptable. But that's my take on it. I'll leave it with the committee to determine what our next steps need to be.
Trey?
Yeah, I'd just like to push back that a tie is totally acceptable. You know, when I think it captured, the vote actually captured the spirit of if you want to call it, the divisiveness and the complications that surround this issue. And I think that you know, at the end of the day, if we did go back and try to rehash it, it's not as if we have a bunch of new information that we didn't have the first time. And it's at best, you know, maybe the vote would go one way or the other. And that's hardly a strong affirmation one direction or the other from this committee. So I think the tie is actually not only acceptable, it was a good indication of how our group felt after many, many hours of debating the details of this. So,
Does anybody else, would anybody else like to weigh in? Carol?
Just a moment, Carol, you're still muted.
Okay, now am I live?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I really appreciate all of the work. This has been such a productive committee with respect for one another and really deep dives into these discussions. I have to agree with Trey, having, you know, been involved both as a committee member and an elected council member, and even now with my work with Cleveland County, trying to work with the city on the Center City TIF, that I don't believe that it is likely in any regard that this committee would come in with an overwhelming majority recommendation one way or another, and that our minutes from those very deep dive discussions mirror how our community feels, and that it is the job of our policymakers, those folks who are currently sitting up there on the dais, to decide, you know, how they want to resolve this very, very difficult policy matter. And I think that what we have, in essence, agreed on is that there is no overwhelming majority opinion that we are likely to get from this group. And I appreciate that more than you could possibly know after, as I said, being involved in this so deeply since 2008. So I'm certainly willing to do whatever the council wants us to do. But I just don't think that further discussion is going to give us, you know, a majority opinion that's strong.
Can I jump in?
Aisha?
Oh, sorry, Aisha's.
Aisha? She's muted.
Okay, there she is.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
So kind of staying on the same topic about readdressing, I think my recommendation would be that regarding the TIF, just as Carol and everyone, Trey, everyone is saying, it's very representative of how our citizens, to me, are very divided and very, we're very passionate. I think everyone on our committee was very passionate, and everyone was very respectful of where everyone felt, and it was pretty much divided. I think if we had a full committee, we would still be that very close to the vote, and it would be very nice to know if city council wants us to, the members want us to go back to to rehash anything with a little bit more direction. And speaking on that same topic, the auditor position was something that we wanted direction on, and we left it as is because we had none. And now that they are moving forward on an auditor position, it would be nice for us to look at how that position reports and who they report to in the nitty gritty, instead of waiting for another 5 years for it to not have any direction other than city council. And I think there was one more topic. Excuse me? Did someone say something? Okay. There was one more that we addressed, and I cannot remember for the life of me, that we had no input, and we were needing a little guidance. So maybe at our next meeting or prior to the meeting, we can just review everything we've gone over, and as a team just say, hey, these were topics that we think we should readdress because we didn't have guidance. And maybe someone from city council could give us that guidance as to where we need to go as far as the TIF. If they want us to move forward, they should come back and let us know that, yes, we need you to look at this or that. We all feel this way. It'd be very nice to have a little bit more guidance from them. That's it.
Mr. Chairman, I believe there are some more comments on our YouTube feed. And then, Catherine, did you want to make comments? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to mention real quickly that after the last public hearing, we had an item to discuss the comments from the public hearing at your next meeting. We also had an oversight committee meeting last Thursday. The council is discussing the same report tomorrow night. And so it may be that we can get that clarification that you all are wanting at that meeting. And so my suggestion was going to be that we share that with council tomorrow night. I think, Bob, you're going to be there, I know. And then see if we can't get that additional clarification and information for you all for your next meeting. I also suspect council's going to want to add some things to your list. So I don't think any of them will be a big surprise to you, but they'll be discussing that tomorrow.
That sounds good. Does anybody else have any miscellaneous comments that they'd like to make regarding points that either Mr. Castleberry or somebody else from the public has made?
Thanks for your leadership, Bob.
Well, thank you, Kevin. I've really enjoyed this, and I hope that we get to continue looking at some of the things that are really relevant to what we're facing as a city right now. I sure hope you guys are willing to go forward if that's what the council wants us to do. I do want to make it clear to the
Misery loves company, man.
I'd like to make it clear to the public that when we have gone forward on several of these items where we're sending it forward to the city council with no recommendation, there are several of them, as Aisha pointed out, that we just needed more clarification in what they were intending us to look at. And I'm hoping that we get that clarification from the council and get to come back and discuss some of those thorny topics like ethics. We thought that the Bill of Rights was worth discussing, but probably something that the city council should maybe send through a committee process so that it had some form, so that it had some substance to it that would produce a relevant conversation on our part. And now that might be a long enough process that another commission with another iteration than ours ends up looking at it. But I think I think that's a worthwhile way to send it forward. And I want the public to understand that everything that comes forward without a recommendation doesn't necessarily mean that we thought that it was a bad idea. There are several items that we didn't think were worthy of considering, but by and large, we needed some clarification from the council, and I hope we're able to get it. again, the other thing that I think that the public at large needs to know about our commission is that it has been very well attended for such a large body. In my experience, to have a body of 17 people that never failed to get a quorum. We decided not to meet a few times because of COVID, but we didn't ever fail to get a quorum, and we didn't fail to have good, respectful conversations with each other, knowing each other well enough to know where we disagreed and why, and still be able to talk about those disagreements, not in terms of our ego, but in terms of what we thought was best for the city. I think that's made this a really enjoyable process for me, and I want the public to be aware that we've got a very functional and very good committee to be working on these things.
Chairman Thompson, would you like Annalise to read the other comments?
Yes, please.
All right. Brandy Studley, Ward 1. If you are going to change the words, that should go up for a vote. Cindy Tusillo, Ward 5. Let the people elect for a vacancy. They voted the original council member, so should be able to vote for the replacement. Kristen Thomas, Ward 6. I think the mayor term should be 4 years and council should be 2 years. Amanda Wilson, Ward 1. Norman citizens should vote on filling vacancies and pay raises, disagree on longer term limits on both council and mayor. Kristen Thomas, Ward 6. Political affiliation for candidates for mayor and city council should continue to not be a factor during elections. Brandy Studley, Ward 1. The climate of this city seems to have changed a lot since you last met. I agree that you need to take a step back and regroup. That's all.
I think that's everything, Chairman.
Okay, I'd like to thank the committee for showing up tonight. And I will be making presentation tomorrow to the city council. If there's anything that you want me to be sure to say, please feel free to either text me or email me or call me and let me know. I'll do my best to represent us well and accurately. And with that, I think we should adjourn.
Okay. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.